He's one of my favorite humans, and I want to talk with him about the Super Bowl before we turn the page to the draft season. None other than my friend Mike Mayock back here on the program. How you doing, Mike?
Rich, I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. You're in Philly? Is that where you are?
I'm in Southeast Georgia.
Okay, Southeast Georgia. Very good. Because I was going to ask you how the light poles were doing. All right, so I'd love to get your 2 cents. What were you thinking watching this Super Bowl 59, Mike, as it played out?
I think three things stuck out to me, both during the game and then when I watched the tape again. And number one, the Eagles' defensive line. Everybody knows what they did. They didn't blitz the whole game. And Rich, I don't care if you're Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes. If you get hit early enough, often enough, or feel enough pressure get moved around the pocket, sooner or later it speeds up your internal clock. And that happened really quickly to Mahomes. No, and by the way, I mean, that's not a shot at Mahomes.
No.
That's just saying that the Eagles' defensive line compressed that pocket like I've never seen in a Super Bowl before. The tackles from Kansas City got pushed back into his lap. The Eagles' defensive tackles are so fast. Jalen Carter chased him down in the first or second series from inside out. The defensive line, I thought, was the number one story of the game. The number two story of the game for me is that all year long I've been saying somebody's going to have enough talent and a good enough scheme to force the Eagles to play left-handed, meaning shut down Saquon Barkley and force the quarterback to beat them. And the quarterback, again, in his second Super Bowl was outstanding, especially his deep ball accuracy and his ability to use his legs to win a football game. So you're always probably going to want a little more from him in the conventional pass game, but the combination of what he can do with his legs and his accuracy, I think makes him a high-level quarterback. And then lastly, and very simply, even though they couldn't run the football, you know, Barkley averaged under 3 yards a carry, they stayed at it. And it's such a lesson for other NFL teams. Rich, they ran the ball 45 times, and they only averaged 3 yards a carry. But they knew who they were. They understand their identity, and everything comes off Saquon Barkley in the run game.
And, you know, of all the things you just said, I want to linger on Jalen Hurts for a second, because we're going to end up having this conversation quite a bit, as we always do at a combine and a draft season, about finding the franchise quarterback. Hurts, you mentioned his deep throwing ability and so many of his great decisions that he made in yet another big game of his life. It is just the inner stuff, though, that I love about him. I love his journey. I love the inner stuff. How can you find that out at a combine? How can you find out what a kid's makeup is at a combine, in a top 30 visit, in over the next 2 months, Mike? Give me some examples on finding that stuff out.
Yeah, I think the combine is really hard because you get a defined number of minutes and a horn blows and the kid moves on. You know, so you're trying to get at the combine, you're trying to get a little bit of X and O schematics out of them, but you're also trying to meet the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the beginning of the process, because you're going to go from that. You're probably going to be at his pro day workout. You're probably going to go out to dinner the night before if you can. And there might be 10 teams that want him. I mean, I remember the night before CeeDee Lamb worked out. We had him out to dinner. And what an impressive young man he was. But the first time I met Jalen Hurts was at the combine interview, and I came away deeply affected. I mean, humble, with a wonderful story to tell you a little bit about. Son of a coach, all these different coaches, coordinators, gets replaced at halftime of a national championship game by Tua. So I felt, Rich, in a very short amount of time, I felt an inner strength from this kid that was rare. And I remember it specifically. So I followed up with him a little bit thereafter. And obviously the Eagles took him in the second round. And the first time I went to an Eagles practice, and as you know, I live in Philly most of the year, I went down to an Eagle practice and training camp, and somebody jumped on my back, and it was Jalen Hurts. And he hugged me and said, you know, I thought you were going to take me. And again, it was just kind of feeling this connection with a young man who had a real story to tell. How did you deal with adversity? And that's a big question in all of our lives. We all want to know how our kids are going to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And this kid, what was he, the 53rd pick in the draft? Second round. I think there were 8 quarterbacks left in the quarterfinals. 7 of them were first rounders, and he was the only one that wasn't.
Wow.
Yet he walked away with the brass ring. And there's more to this kid than height, weight, speed.
Yeah, and it's amazing the guy who he's throwing touchdowns to in the Super Bowl is the guy who caught the pass from Tua the night he got benched to win the national championship. There's so much you can't make this stuff up, Mike Mayock, from this team and the roster building. And I know you admire what Howie Roseman does from your position. Give me your number one Howie Roseman move for this roster. Give me the one that you're impressed with the most, Mike.
It's funny because I do a podcast with my daughter about the Eagles. So I've watched every tape. I've got all 9,000 pages of notes, and I got all Howie's moves right in front of me here.
I love it.
And I broke it down to trade, draft, and UFA. And on the trade side, A.J. Brown and Darius Slay. And don't forget, I mean, Jahan Dotson was a little bit of an oversight all season, yet, he caught the first big pass down to the 1-yard line. Free agency, Saquon Barkley, to me, that's the biggest. It's the most obvious. It's also the biggest, not just because of who he is on the field, but I think he was a calming influence in that locker room that was in shambles after a year ago. And when your best player, Rich, is the most selfless on your team, when he's saying, "No, you don't need to put me back in against the Giants. I don't need to set that record." All the players in the locker room are looking at each other saying, "How can I be selfish if he's selfless?" And I think he did a lot to calm down that locker room. So between him and Zach Bond in free agency, and I think you got to give Vic Fangio a little pat on the back for that one in addition to Howie. And then you look at the draft. Rich, they don't miss in the first round. Devontae Smith was a first-round pick, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell. And in the second round, just in the last 4 or 5 years, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Jalen Hurts, Cooper DeJean. And that's a long way of saying, Rich, that a general manager's job is 365 days a year of player acquisition. And what I think Howie does better than anybody is he hits all of it, whether it's draft, free agency, trades, undrafted free agents. I mean, they're starting safety, Blankenship, undrafted free agent. So I don't think you can just identify one move, even though Barkley would be the one. I think you have to look at the composite of what he's put together. I thought they were the best roster 2 years ago against the Chiefs in the whole league. I thought they were the best roster a year ago and this year. So I think Howie Roseman just continues to outdo himself.
Yeah, and he pays the right guys too, right? You know what I mean? Like if you're going to pay somebody, let's pay Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, and you're not missing on that. And then one of your linemen, a couple of your linemen, he seems to hit it right when it comes to paying. He's not dead capping a lot of mistakes. You know what I mean? He seems to nail that one too, Mike.
You know what it is, Rich? And part of it is he came up on the salary cap side. So he understands the infrastructure of what you can and can't do dollar and cents wise, as well as any general manager that's ever lived. But to manage the roster and the cap the way they do, you also have to draft well, because you have to have a nucleus of young players playing on the rookie wage scale. That's the key. That's how you can retain players as they get older and better, as long as you're replenishing with rookie cap guys. So I think that's really the sweet sauce. Can they do things, can they do things like extend players and pay out a bonus that doesn't count against the cap? And they have all those things too, how he uses everything he has, but you can't do what they've done unless you draft well.
Mike Mayock here, Believe in Eagles Pod. He and Lee Mayock co-hosting that together. Obviously, check it out this week after the Super Bowl win in Super Bowl 59. It's now Combine time, Mike, and I'd love to pick your brain on a couple of things. First up, Travis Hunter is going as a cornerback. You hear that and you say what?
I say appropriate. And I think most NFL teams are going to work him out as a corner. That will be his main job. But I think you're short-sighted if you don't think he can help you on offense also. So what I'd like to see happen, he was listed at about 181, 182 pounds. I think once he gets into a situation where he's playing predominantly one position, he's on a nutrition and weight program where he can concentrate on being a great corner. I think he'll be 190 to 195 pounds. But I also think I've never seen a better conditioned athlete from the college tape I watched. And I think you've got to find a package of plays every week for this kid on offense. And he's got to play. And one week it might be 6 plays. Another week it might be 14 plays. But you got to get him some touches on the offensive side of the ball because he's just too special.
And I know you left this life long ago, but sitting on NFL Network, boy, I want to see him working out, man. You know, I want to see him working out. I want him out there. I don't know if we will. But that said, let's say he does work out. And how do scouts go up to who and say, we want to see him run routes too? Like, do we see him work out with the wide receiving group as well, Mike?
Yeah, I think there's, I don't know what he will or won't do at his combine or his pro day, but typically there'll be a group of scouts that ask, hey, I want to see Christian McCaffrey run routes as a slot receiver.
He was unbelievable when he did that, Mike. He was better than every wide receiver that day when he did that.
Right?
Yes, I remember that. He was the best at it. He was unreal.
And that's my point. When the scouts want to see something, when the coaches want to see something, they ask. So I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to ask him to do some things. Now, what he does and doesn't do is ultimately up to the kid. But at the end of the day, he's supposed to be a great kid, and all you got to do is turn the tape on. There's not a whole lot of questions there.
And I'm wondering how the news sat in Boulder, Colorado, that Shedeur Sanders did not get an invitation. Who decides who gets invited and who does not at a combine, Mike?
Well, there's basically every team in the league has some input, and the combine has their own cooperation with a group of scouts and people from around the league. And I've seen teams try to get a kid invited, like, hey, so-and-so didn't get invited. On the other hand, I've seen teams happy that a kid doesn't get invited because they happen to like him and say, let's keep this kid quiet. I mean, that's reality, Rich.
Like, don't give him any shine, any spotlight, because we want him under the radar so we could snag him. That's what you're saying?
Hell yeah.
Unreal.
Yep.
Wow. What's your assessment of the quarterbacks? I know I asked this of you 2 weeks ago, but I'm wondering if you've grinded anymore. And now, I mean, I see so many of these evaluations where Cam Ward or Shedeur is number one, and somebody even thinks the Giants will trade up, things of that nature. What's your opinion of the quarterback group here, Mike?
Well, to oversimplify, I think that Cam and Shedeur, in whatever order, are 1 and 2. I don't think you can put them in the top 4 from last year. I thought Bo Nix might be an interesting comparison for Shedeur. I think both of them are going to have to go to a place that's a good fit for them. Realistically, Rich, you can go back over the last 20 years and look at the NFL draft in the first round at quarterbacks, and at best, it's a 50-50 proposition. And most of it's because kids get pushed up higher than they should go, and there's a bad fit, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why Bo Nix was so interesting to me last year. I don't think I gave him enough love last year. He was a better quarterback than I thought he was. But most importantly, he went to a coach and a system that was a really good fit for him. They surrounded him. They put an infrastructure around him. not unlike Minnesota did with the USC retread this year. Thought Kevin did a great job supporting that situation. So for me, I think quarterbacks probably go too early most of the time, but most importantly, it's about the infrastructure and the fit. And if you don't make that kid, if you don't like, look at the kid in Carolina right now. He played a little bit better this year, but it was a stark comparison to him and CJ Stroud in year one. And you look at Jaden Daniels, what a great fit. What a great job they did. I think Caleb Williams is just as talented. Be interesting to see what happens there. So, I mean, that's my diatribe on quarterbacks and where they end up, and that most of them get pushed up higher than they should go.
And so, who's currently right now sitting atop your draft board? Who's number one? Who's the best prospect that you think is available?
I'll put it this way, and you'll laugh because you've heard me say this before, but
yes.
I think Cam Ward has the higher ceiling, and I think Shedeur has the higher floor. So, Cam to me is a little bit more of a, I don't want to say boom or bust because I don't think he's a bust, but he's got a chance to play at a very high level because he's very gifted. I think Shedeur is a little bit more like Bo Nix, where he's really accurate, really smart, good decision maker, needs to get to the right place where they take advantage of those things. Because I thought he did get in some bad habits in the pocket in the last 2 years with that awful offensive line in front of him. So what is interesting to me, Rich, is behind those two guys. I think the kid from Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, has made up some ground. He can spin it, and he's not a great athlete, but he's not a bad athlete. Jalen Milroe is the guy that has first round talent all over him. Big, strong, fast, big arm, but had a bad year this year. Too many question marks. I'd love to get him in the second or third round and have no pressure to play him, put him in a system behind, like Green Bay's done the last several quarterbacks. Sit a guy for 2, 3, 4 years, let him absorb it and learn from it, polish his craft, and come out and start 3, 4 years into his career. That's the guy that I'm intrigued by.
And what about overall? Throw defensive players in, everybody in, at the entire draft in a hat. Number one atop your board is who, Mike?
Number one with everybody, it would have to be the corner / wide receiver from Boulder. I think he's rare. I think he's special. I think you and I could have a great conversation about the running back situation in the NFL, and has that changed? The undervaluing of running backs because of what happened in free agency a year ago, with Saquon and Josh Jacobs and the kid in Baltimore and the 7th round pick for Joe Mixon. But that's a way of saying Ashton Genty to me from Boise. Man, is he fun to watch. I love his tape. I think he's special. I think his contact balance is rare. I think he's a first round running back. And then the two guys that I love watching, Rich, are Abdul Carter from Penn State.
He's amazing.
Who I think is a high-level edge rusher day one. And there's a kid at Georgia that reminds me a little bit of Micah Parsons. And his name's Jalen Walker. And two reasons he reminds me of Parsons. One is in base defense, he's an off-the-ball linebacker, just like Micah Parsons was at Penn State. And then when they go to sub, he lines up anywhere from the A gap out to the 9 technique, the wide defensive end. But what he does best is explosive and rush the quarterback. So those two guys, Jalen Walker and Abdul Carter coming off the edge, they get me fired up.
You get me fired up, pal. Thanks for the 2 cents. Thanks for doing this. You're the best. And I can't wait to keep chatting with you. You be well, sir.
Thanks, brother. Great talking to you.
Believe in Eagles podcast. Lee and Mike Mayock. Check it out on the Believe Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts. That's the one and only Mike Mayock here on the Rich Eisen Show. Yes, I agree. There's a round of applause right there. That was awesome. God, I just love that guy. The best.